What would you do if a man in a $1,000 tie laughed at a judge in open court, only to realize seconds later that the entire room was about to watch the truth tear his life apart? Drop a comment telling us whether arrogance should ever survive in a courtroom. Because what happened at 9:12 that Friday morning in Providence left even the bailiff staring in silence. This was not just another traffic hearing. This was not just another polished attorney trying to outtalk a working family. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the truth has a way of finding the loudest liar, because before this story is over, one man will lose the career he thought made him untouchable. By the time the hearing ended, there were tears in the gallery, a mother clutching a hospital letter with shaking hands, and a lawyer who walked in like he owned the building walking out like he no longer recognized the man inside his own skin. Like this video, if you believe respect matters most when you have the power to humiliate someone, because today, you are going to see exactly what happens when confidence mutates into cruelty. And trust me, the most devastating moment was not when the judge spoke. It was when the lawyer finally understood why everyone else had gone quiet. Share this with someone who needs to see what justice looks like when it arrives slowly, calmly, and with absolute precision. On Friday, October 17, 2025, Courtroom B of the Providence Municipal Justice Center was already packed by 8:47 a.m. The room had that familiar old building smell of polished wood, printer toner, coffee, and rain-soaked coats. Outside, a cold drizzle tapped against the courthouse windows in a soft, stubborn rhythm. Inside, fluorescent lights washed over the dark walnut benches, the brass railings, and the flag standing motionless in the corner behind the bench. At 8:51, Nathan Mercer stepped through the side entrance like he was late to a board meeting he still expected everyone else to thank him for attending. He was 37 years old, 6'1", broad-shouldered, and handsome in the sharp, severe way expensive men often are when they have spent years practicing how to look bored by ordinary people. His charcoal Zegna suit looked cut directly onto him. His burgundy Tom Ford tie sat perfectly centered. His Rolex Submariner flashed once under the overhead light when he checked the time. Then again when he smoothed back his dark hair and handed his leather briefcase to a nervous 26-year-old associate named Colin Bryce. Nathan drove a black 2024 Mercedes S580 with dealer plates still on the rear frame because he liked the message it sent. He billed in 6-minute increments. He never carried cash. He corrected waiters if they mispronounced his name. And for the last 3 years, he had become one of the fastest-rising defense attorneys in Rhode Island, not because people trusted him, but because rich men with ugly problems believed he could make consequences disappear. He was there representing Blake Holloway, 28, son of Holloway Development Group founder Richard Holloway, one of the largest commercial landlords in the state. Blake had been cited after a September 28 crash at the corner of Broad Street and Elmwood Avenue. His silver 2023 BMW M4 had jumped the line at a red light and clipped an electric delivery bike, shoved a parked Toyota Corolla half onto the curb, and sent 2 pedestrians scrambling hard enough that one of them fell and tore ligaments in her knee. To Nathan, it was supposed to be simple: argue ambiguity, attack credibility, reduce the damage, move on before lunch. To everyone else in the room, it was already something far heavier. The presiding judge that morning was Judge Samuel Bell, 72 years old, with silver hair, deep-set hazel eyes, and the kind of voice that made people lower theirs without realizing they were doing it. He wore simple black robes over a white shirt and a navy tie. No theatrics. No ego. He had spent 12 years as a public defender before becoming a district judge, and over time he had earned a reputation all over New England for listening longer than most people talked. He was not famous because he shouted. He was famous because he never needed to. People loved him because he saw what others missed: the single mother behind on fines, the grandfather too proud to admit he could not read the notice mailed to him, the teenager acting tough because fear had become his first language. Judge Bell could be firm. He could be devastating, but even his harshest rulings carried the feeling that he was still talking to the part of you that might someday be better than this moment. Nathan had no use for men like that. As he stood at counsel table flipping through his file, he leaned slightly toward Colin and said, not quite quietly enough, "Let's hope the old saint wants another heartwarming clip for the internet." Colin froze. The courtroom clerk Ellen Pierce looked up from our docket. Bailiff Marcus Green turned his head half an inch. A few people in the gallery exchanged glances. Nathan noticed. Nathan smiled. If you've ever seen someone mistake discomfort for admiration, you know the look he wore then. Drop a comment telling us if you've ever met a person so used to winning that they no longer heard themselves anymore. At 9:03, the victims arrived together, though none of them had planned it that way. Mateo Silva came first, his left arm still supported in a black sling under a tan windbreaker, his face pale but composed. He was 29, a food delivery rider and part-time auto shop helper, a widower raising his 7-year-old daughter Sophia in a second-floor apartment off Messer Street. His collarbone had cracked in 2 places when Blake's BMW clipped the rear of his bike. His right wrist still carried the stiffness of a hairline fracture. He had missed 17 days of work, and because gig work did not come with paid leave, those 17 days had felt like 17 trapdoors opening under him one by one. Right behind him came Ruth Donnelly, 68, retired school secretary, widow, small and straight-backed despite the cane she now used after stumbling during the crash when her parked 2017 Corolla lurched over the curb. She wore a lilac raincoat buttoned all the way to the throat and carried a neat accordion folder full of estimates, receipts, and handwritten notes. Then came Lena Brooks, 42, a middle school science teacher from Cranston, wearing a navy peacoat and a knee brace beneath dark slacks. She had not been struck by the car, but when the BMW jumped toward the crosswalk she twisted, fell, and tore her meniscus trying to pull a 10-year-old student she was tutoring out of the way. The student, Ava Benton, had escaped with a bruised elbow and a week of nightmares. Lena had not slept well since. And with them, holding her father's hand and clutching a faded purple inhaler case like it was a toy she could not afford to lose, was Sophia. The moment Nathan noticed the little girl, he frowned, not with empathy but with annoyance. To him, this was emotional staging. To everyone else, it was just life arriving exactly as it had been broken. When the session opened, Judge Bell adjusted his glasses, glanced once over the room and called the case. Municipal Traffic and Civil Impact Hearing, Docket TM 25-18477, City of Providence versus Blake Holloway. Nathan rose smoothly. "Good morning, Your Honor. Nathan Mercer on behalf of Mr. Holloway." Blake stood beside him in a beige cashmere quarter-zip and white sneakers that probably cost more than Mateo's monthly electric bill. His blonde hair was styled. His jaw was set. He looked irritated to be there. Judge Bell nodded. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer, Mr. Holloway." Then he looked toward the other side. "I also have present Mr. Mateo Silva, Ms. Ruth Donnelly, Ms. Lena Brooks, Officer Daniel Ruiz, and witness Mia Perez. Thank you all for appearing." Nathan lifted an eyebrow. "Your Honor, with respect, this is a traffic and liability matter. We are not here for a town hall." A soft murmur moved through the benches. Judge Bell folded his hands. "And yet the consequences traveled beyond a ticket, counselor, so we will hear from the people who were actually there." Nathan gave a tiny laugh. It was brief, dry, controlled, but in a silent courtroom, even a small act of contempt lands like a slap. Blake smirked beside him. That was the first outrage moment, not the crash, not yet the laugh. Because everyone in that room understood something Nathan did not. When a person in pain comes to court, they are not just asking what the law says. They are asking whether anybody in authority will admit that what happened to them mattered. Nathan straightened his papers. "Then I would ask the court to keep this efficient. Sympathy is not evidence." Judge Bell did not blink. "No," he said, "but evidence often reveals why sympathy exists." That line hit the room like a gavel before the gavel. Ellen Pierce stopped typing for half a second. Marcus Green's mouth twitched. Lena Brooks lowered her eyes to hide the expression on her face. And for the first time, Colin looked at Nathan not like a mentor, but like a man stepping out onto ice he had not bothered to test. If you believe one sentence can change the temperature of an entire room, hit that subscribe button, because Judge Bell had just opened a door Nathan Mercer still thought he could close. Officer Daniel Ruiz testified first. He was 33, compact, clean-shaven, and spoke in a measured, no-drama tone that tends to make juries trust police officers more than they realize. He described arriving at 6:18 p.m. on September 28 at the Broad and Elmwood intersection after 3 separate 911 calls. He observed skid marks, a damaged electric bike, a displaced parked vehicle, and Mr. Silva sitting on the curb holding his shoulder while a young child cried against his side. Nathan sent Ood for cross-examination almost before Officer Ruiz finished. "Officer," he said, pacing slowly, "you did not personally observe my client enter the intersection on a red light, correct?" "Correct, I arrived after the collision." "So your conclusion relied on statements." "Statements and physical evidence." "Statements from upset civilians in a chaotic scene." "And surveillance, review noted in my supplemental report." That made Nathan pause. Only for a second, but people noticed. He recovered instantly. "We'll get to that. For now, let's be precise. You found no evidence of intoxication." "Correct." "No fleeing." "Correct." "No criminal intent." "This is not a hearing on criminal intent." A few heads lifted at that answer. Nathan smiled thinly, as if the officer had been baited into irrelevance. Then Nathan pivoted hard, and Mr. Silva was operating an electric delivery bike at dusk in light rain. "Yes." "Dark jacket." "Yes." "Moving between lanes." "Not according to the footage." That second pause from Nathan was longer. He looked down at the report, then up again. "What footage?" The entire gallery seemed to breathe in at once. Officer Ruiz turned slightly toward the bench. The pharmacy camera on the northwest corner and the city traffic camera, both were referenced in the supplemental report filed Monday. Nathan flipped through his file with more force than necessary. Colin leaned toward him and whispered something frantic. Nathan's jaw tightened. Because here was the first revelation that changed everything. Nathan Mercer had come in expecting frightened civilians and a soft judge. He had not come in expecting video. Judge Bell watched him quietly. "Counselor, did you not review the supplement?" Nathan's voice sharpened. "Your Honor, we received a late upload of over 200 pages. I do not intend to try this case by surprise." Judge Bell's face stayed calm. "Then today may be a valuable reminder that preparation is cheaper than arrogance." That was another line people in that room would repeat for months. Nathan flushed, though only at the edges. "I object to the characterization." "Noted," said Judge Bell. "Overruled." You could hear the fluorescent buzz again. You could hear rain against the windows. You could hear Blake whisper, "This is ridiculous," under his breath. And then Judge Bell said the sentence that made Colin stop, breathing through his nose. "Clerk, please prepare the surveillance playback." Like this video, if you believe truth gets louder the moment someone tries to talk over it. Because Nathan Mercer was about to watch the first crack form in the image he had spent years selling to the world. The courtroom monitor lowered with a slow electric hum. The pharmacy footage was grainy but clear enough. A timestamp in the corner read 9/28/25, 18/14/27. Cars moved through light rain. Headlights reflected off the wet asphalt in white streaks. Mateo's delivery bike entered frame first, staying close to the right edge. Ruth Donnelly's Corolla sat parked legally along the curb. Lena Brooks and Ava Benton waited at the crosswalk. Then from the southbound lane, Blake Holloway's silver BMW came into view far too fast for city traffic, wove around a van stopping for the yellow, and punched through the red just as Mateo began clearing the intersection. The impact was not cinematic, it was worse, sharp, ugly, real. The BMW clipped the rear of the bike. Mateo spun sideways, struck the pavement shoulder first, slid and slammed into the curb. The bike bounced once and folded. Ruth's parked Corolla jumped. Lena reached for Ava and lost her footing. The little girl screamed even though the monitor had no audio, because everyone in the room could see the shape of that scream. Sophia buried her face into her father's jacket. Ruth lifted a hand to her mouth. Blake stopped smirking. Nathan did not move at all. The camera rolled further. People rushed in. A young woman in a green cafe apron stepped off the sidewalk and pointed straight at Blake's driver's side window. Officer Ruiz paused the video and identified her as Mia Perez, 19, employee at Harbor Bean Cafe, eyewitness. Nathan stood slowly. The video does not show signal sequencing. Officer Ruiz replied, the traffic camera does. The city feed came next. Lower resolution, wider angle, but enough. Enough to show the red, enough to show the speed, enough to show there had never really been a question. A gasp rippled across the courtroom when the frame froze with Blake's BMW halfway through the intersection, under a red light that had already held for more than 2 seconds. Nathan adjusted his tie. His fingers slipped once. What happened next was where another lawyer might have recalibrated. Another lawyer might have softened. Another lawyer might have looked at the injured people in front of him, then looked at the judge, then looked inward and realized this was no longer a place for swagger. Nathan Mercer chose something else. He stepped to the lectern and said, even if liability is assigned, Your Honor, we still need to separate actual injury from emotional theater. The room turned cold. Lena's eyes widened. Ruth looked stunned. Mateo shut his eyes for one long second like a man trying to keep a harder version of himself from rising. Judge Bell leaned back. Mr. Mercer, he said very softly, do you hear yourself? Nathan answered immediately, perfectly. That was the choice moment. He could still step back. He could still apologize. He could still salvage dignity. Instead, he doubled down in front of a child, 3 victims, 2 cameras, and a judge whose entire strength came from the fact that he did not need to dominate the room to control it. Judge Bell nodded once. Very well, then let's continue. What nobody knew yet was that the surveillance footage was not the evidence that would destroy Nathan Mercer's career. It was only the beginning. The real damage was still sitting inside Officer Ruiz's supplemental file, buried in 23 seconds of bodycam audio Nathan had not even bothered to hear. Share this with someone who thinks cruelty is a strategy, because the next piece of evidence did not just weaken Nathan's case. It exposed the man behind it. Mateo Silva testified next. His voice was low, slightly rough, the voice of a man who had spent too many days answering questions from insurers who sounded bored by suffering. He explained that he began delivering food at night after his wife, Teresa, died of sepsis 18 months earlier. He worked days at Ortega Auto Body 3 times a week and nights on the bike to cover rent, school uniforms, and Sophia's insulin supplies. On the evening of the crash, he had picked up 2 orders, 1 Thai food, 1 pizza, and was trying to finish before Sophia's babysitter had to leave. He described the light, the wet road, the green signal, the blur of silver, then pain like heat exploding through bone. He said the first thing he remembered clearly after hitting the ground was hearing Sophia scream, "Papa," in a voice he had never heard from her before and prayed never to hear again. Nathan stood for cross-examination, and walked toward him with the polished sympathy of a man loading a weapon. "Mr. Silva," he said, "you were working 2 jobs." "Yes." "You were tired." "Yes." "You were riding in rain." "Yes." "You were under pressure to complete deliveries quickly." Mateo looked straight at him. "I was under pressure to feed my daughter." Several people in the gallery murmured. Nathan kept going. "And under that pressure, you may have entered before confirming it was fully safe." "No." "You may have assumed the driver would stop." "I had the green." "You may have assumed." "I had the green," Mateo repeated louder. Nathan leaned in. "That was not my question." Mateo's breathing changed. You could see it in his chest. Judge Bell stepped in. "Counselor, the witness has answered." Nathan spread his hands. "I'm simply testing reliability." Judge Bell's eyes hardened. "Then test facts. Do not test a man's dignity because you dislike where the facts are leading." That line sat heavy in the air. But Nathan was not finished. He held up a medical bill. "You are claiming lost wages, therapy, bike replacement, medication, and childcare support. This total exceeds $12,000. Isn't it true your online fundraiser also received donations?" Mateo blinked, then nodded once. "Yes." So some of these expenses were already covered. A whisper of disgust moved through the room. Even Blake looked uncomfortable now. Mateo swallowed. "The fundraiser paid 2 months of rent and part of my daughter's medicine." Nathan's next question came out clean, cold, and catastrophic. "Then the public already helped you, Mr. Silva. Are you asking this court to let you profit from sympathy twice?" The silence afterward felt violent. Ruth Donnelly made a sound that was almost a gasp and almost a prayer. Lena turned toward Judge Bell so fast her chair scraped. Sophia looked up at Nathan with the shocked stillness children get when they first understand that adults can be cruel on purpose. Even Colin looked sick. Judge Bell removed his glasses slowly and set them on the bench. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "approach." Nathan hesitated, then walked up. The white noise machine near the bench clicked on, but everyone could still see Judge Bell's expression. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the way only restrained men can be. He spoke quietly enough that the room had to strain to read lips and posture. "You will not do that again." Nathan's jaw flexed. "I'm defending my client." "You are not defending your client," Judge Bell replied. "You are performing contempt for an audience that has stopped admiring you." Nathan looked back toward the gallery. Several people immediately looked away. That, somehow, seemed to anger him more. When they returned to counsel table, Nathan sat hard enough to rattle his pen. Blake whispered, "Can you get this over with?" Nathan did not answer. Lena Brooks testified after that, steady but visibly angry. She described tutoring Ava Benton after school and waiting for the signal when the BMW surged through. She pulled Ava back and twisted wrong. The surgery consultation was scheduled for November. She had already exhausted most of her paid sick leave. When Nathan asked whether she had been emotionally primed by seeing Mateo injured before evaluating her own pain, Lena stared at him and said, "No. I was emotionally primed by nearly watching a child die in front of me." That earned a sharp exhale from half the room. Then came Ruth Donnelly. She opened her accordion folder with meticulous hands and presented repair estimates, physical therapy copies, and photographs of her Corolla with the rear axle bent. When Nathan tried to suggest the car's prior age reduced compensable value, Ruth said, "Young man, I know my car is old. My husband bought it before he died. I kept it running because I keep everything running. That doesn't mean it was disposable to me." Judge Bell thanked her gently. And still Nathan kept pressing. Because arrogance has a terrible habit. Once it realizes it should stop, it often accelerates instead. If you've ever watched someone dig the hole deeper because they cannot bear the thought of putting the shovel down, Drop a comment telling us the exact moment you knew Nathan Mercer was about to destroy himself. The final civilian witness scheduled for that morning was Mia Perez, the 19-year-old from the cafe. She wore black work pants, white sneakers, and the green apron from Harbor Bean because her manager had let her leave only long enough to testify and return. Her hands trembled when she took the oath. She testified that she had been outside tossing trash when she saw the BMW flying through the light. She ran toward Mateo after the crash and heard Blake say, "He came out of nowhere," before the officer arrived. Nathan approached her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Perez, you work in food service." "Yes." "You were taking out trash." "Yes." "It was raining." "Yes." "You were startled." "Yes." "You are not trained in accident reconstruction." "No." "And yet from across a wet intersection, in evening traffic, you expect this court to accept your interpretation over every other possibility." Mia's voice shook. "I saw the light." Nathan tilted his head. "Did you also see your opportunity to become important?" There it was again, that cruel little blade. Mia's eyes filled instantly. "No." "Did anyone coach you before today?" "No." "Did Mr. Silva's family contact you?" "No." "Did anyone from the city promise to take care of you if you helped them?" Her face changed, not confusion, fear. Judge Bell saw it first, so did Officer Ruiz. Mia looked down at her hands. "No." Nathan took one step closer. "Are you sure?" And then Officer Ruiz stood up. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. "Your Honor," he said, "I need to be heard on that question." Nathan spun. "Excuse me." Judge Bell held up a hand. "Officer." Ruiz glanced at Mia, then at the bench. "There is additional body cam audio in my supplement, time-stamped before this witness gave her formal statement. I believed counsel had reviewed it." Nathan's face did something small and terrible, a flicker, a loss of certainty. Judge Bell turned to Ellen Pierce. "Do we have the audio?" "We do, Your Honor." Nathan objected immediately. "I have not authenticated." Judge Bell cut him off. "Sit down, counselor." It was the first time all morning that Judge Bell's voice had cracked like hardwood. Nathan sat. The body cam clip loaded. No video at first, just shaky footage pointed low as Officer Ruiz moved near the ambulance line at the scene. Rain hissed faintly against the microphone. EMT radios crackled. Then two voices became clear beyond the frame. The first was Blake Holloway's. "What do I say?" The second was Nathan Mercer's. Not polished, not courtroom smooth, not prepared for public consumption. "Say exactly what I told you. He cut in front of you. You were already in the intersection. Don't freelance." The room froze. Then Blake asked, "What about that girl from the cafe?" Nathan answered, "If she talks, she talks. Most witnesses fold when they realize nobody wants their drama. Just stay consistent." The clip ended. Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Nobody even shifted. Judge Bell looked at Nathan for a long, disbelieving moment. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "were you present at the crash scene before the investigating officer completed his initial canvass?" Nathan's lips parted. Nothing came out. Judge Bell asked again, "Were you there?" Nathan cleared his throat. "My client called me. I advised him to remain calm and avoid self-incrimination." Officer Ruiz replied. "Counselor also told Mr. Holloway, quote, 'Most witnesses fold when they realize nobody wants their drama.'" Nathan's face reddened. "That statement is taken out of context." Judge B. L's answer came like a hammer wrapped in velvet. "Context did not help you." That was the shock moment. The point where disbelief turned into something heavier. Because rude lawyers exist in every courthouse. Aggressive cross-examination exists in every courthouse. But when the courtroom hears a man openly strategizing how to pressure witnesses before statements are secured, the air changes. This was no longer about ego. This was about corruption. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the truth doesn't need to shout when the recording is already playing. Because what happened next made even Blake Holloway look at his own lawyer like he had hired a snake and only just realized it had teeth. Nathan stood again, and for the first time all morning he did not look tailored. He looked assembled, fragile at the seams. "Your Honor, this is absurd. I was doing my job. Zealous advocacy is not misconduct." Judge Bell folded his hands. Zealous advocacy is not witness intimidation, and it is certainly not licensed to poison a fact pattern before testimony is taken. Nathan fired back too fast. "That's a dramatic spin." Judge Bell leaned forward. "Dramatic? Counselor, a man broke his collarbone. A woman tore her knee protecting a child. Another woman lost her vehicle and stability. A little girl watched her father hit the pavement. The only person in this room still treating this like a performance is you." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Marcus Green called for order. Ellen Pierce's fingers hovered over her keyboard, then resumed typing with renewed urgency. Blake turned to Nathan and whispered harshly, "You said they had nothing." Nathan hissed back, "Be quiet." But of course that wasn't the end. Because every 1,500 words in a story like this, life has a way of adding one more turn of the knife. Judge Bell announced a 10-minute recess. That was when the second twist arrived. As people stood, a woman in a camel coat rushed through the back doors carrying a white evidence envelope and scanning the room with wild, determined eyes. She was 31, red-haired and breathing hard like she had run from the parking lot. Ellen Pierce recognized her first. "Ms. Hart." Nathan turned, and all the color left his face. Naomi Hart had worked as Nathan's senior paralegal for 4 years. She knew his calendar, his clients, his billing habits, his private temper, and every shortcut he had ever hidden inside polished language. She also knew exactly when he lied, because for years she had been the one cleaning up the paper trail. She stopped 3 feet from counsel table. "I need to speak to the judge," she said. Nathan's voice dropped into something dangerous. "Naomi, not here." Her eyes did not leave his. "Yes, here." People say a courtroom can feel like theater. In that moment, it felt more like the instant before a building gives way. Everyone in the room sensed the load shifting. Share this with someone who thinks secrets stay buried once the cameras stop rolling, because Nathan Mercer's worst problem was no longer the evidence he had ignored. It was the person who had spent years organizing it. Judge Bell reconvened and allowed Naomi Hart to be sworn for a limited evidentiary proffer. Nathan objected again, then objected a third time with increasing desperation, each objection sounding less legal and more personal. Judge Bell listened, then said, "If your objection had the strength your composure lacks, I might be more persuaded." Naomi stood at the witness stand clutching the envelope so tightly her knuckles went white. She was not glamorous. She was not theatrical. She was tired. The deep kind of tired that comes from carrying another person's moral debt until your own body refuses to cooperate. She testified that 2 nights before the hearing, Nathan had instructed her to delete an internal memo referencing his early contact with Blake at the crash scene, as well as billing notes showing he had spoken to witness Mia Perez's landlord through an investigator the week before. The courtroom reacted all at once. Mia went pale. Officer Ruiz turned fully toward Nathan. Colin whispered, "Oh my God." Naomi continued, voice shaking. "He told me it was housekeeping. He said if anyone asked, the investigator was only confirming residence. But the call log included a note that said, 'Financial pressure leverage if necessary.' Nathan surged to his feet. That is not what it means. Naomi looked at him then, and what passed across her face was not anger, it was grief. Nathan, I typed it. The room actually made a sound. One of those involuntary collective sounds people make when a truth lands too cleanly to dodge. Judge Bell asked, Ms. Hart, did you delete the memo? No, Your Honor. I printed the email chain and forwarded it to myself because I thought if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life pretending I never saw what was happening. She handed the envelope to Marcus Green, who delivered it to the bench. Inside were copies of emails, billing entries, and a message Nathan had sent at 11:43 p.m. the previous Wednesday. Need Perez rattled before Friday. People like her disappear when rent gets shaky. No one who read the judge's expression after that ever forgot it. Not rage. Not surprise. Disappointment so deep it looked older than the room. Judge Bell lowered the papers. Mr. Mercer, do you contest authorship? Nathan's mouth opened, then closed. This should have been the breakdown. This should have been the moment he finally admitted he had crossed every line a lawyer cannot cross. Instead, he chose the third path arrogance always offers cowards. Attack the witness. Naomi barely got back to her seat before Nathan began. Your Honor, Ms. Hart was terminated last month. Naomi turned sharply. No, I resigned. For performance concerns. For refusing to falsify time entries. Nathan ignored her. She is disgruntled. She was emotional. She made repeated errors on confidential matters. Naomi laughed once, a broken sound. I made errors because I was having panic attacks in the office bathroom. Colin looked at Nathan like he'd never met him. Judge Bell spoke, Counselor, enough. Nathan wasn't hearing him anymore. That's what happens when a man realizes his control is gone. He confuses volume with rescue. He pointed toward Naomi. This woman has every incentive to manufacture context. No, Naomi said, louder than she had spoken yet. I had every incentive to stay silent. Silence paid my rent. That line rippled through the gallery like a pulse. Lena Brooks began to cry quietly, not because Naomi was dramatic, but because most people know exactly how expensive the truth can be. Judge Bell took a breath. Court will stand in recess for 15 minutes while copies are made and bar counsel is notified. And then another surprise moved through the room. From the back bench, a woman in a dark green suit rose and introduced herself. Alicia Brenner, Deputy Disciplinary Counsel. I'm already here, Your Honor. Nathan turned toward her so sharply his chair scraped. Brenner was 45, precise, and had the stillness of someone who had spent years watching professionals destroy themselves with their own mouths. Our office received a complaint package this morning, she said. Given what I've now heard in open court, I intend to remain. The choice moment had returned, but this time the consequences were no longer theoretical. Nathan Mercer could stop. He could ask for counsel. He could withdraw. He could apologize. He could salvage one thread of humanity. Instead, in front of everyone, he laughed again. It was smaller than the first laugh, rawer, meaner, but it was still a laugh. This is insane, he said. All of this over a traffic case. Judge Bell looked at him for so long that people in the room began to understand the hearing had changed categories. This was no longer a hearing about a crash. It was a hearing about character under power. Then Judge Bell said, it stopped being a traffic case the moment you decided the vulnerable were props. If you believe there is a point where a person is no longer burying themselves by accident, like this video, because Nathan Mercer had now crossed into full daylight with nowhere left to hide. The next hour turned into the most talked-about courtroom proceeding in Providence that year. Judge Bell recalled Mia Perez and allowed a narrow inquiry into witness contact. Mia admitted that a man in a navy raincoat had shown up at her apartment building 3 days before the hearing, and asked her landlord whether she was behind on rent. The landlord, Mr. Edwin Gallo, later texted her warning that some lawyer-looking guy had asked if she was the girl from the crash, and whether money problems might make court inconvenient. Nathan denied sending anyone for intimidation. Then Alicia Brenner asked whether the investigator he used was named Thomas Carney. Nathan stiffened. "I'm not answering disciplinary hypotheticals in open court." Brenner said, "Good, because this is not hypothetical. Mr. Carney has already provided a sworn declaration." The gallery almost exploded again. Marcus Green had to call twice for order. Brenner continued. "He states he was instructed by Mr. Mercer to determine whether Ms. Perez had arrears, unstable employment, or immigration concerns that could make her reluctant to appear." Mia covered her mouth. Naomi closed her eyes. Nathan stared at the bench with the hollow focus of a man, frantically searching for a version of reality that still obeyed him. And still, he would not give up the performance. He turned toward Judge Bell and said, "Your Honor, with respect, I know your style. You prefer emotional equities. That may play well online, but it is not how sophisticated litigation works." The room went dead. Because insulting a judge is one thing, mocking the very values that made ordinary people trust that judge is another. Judge Bell did not react immediately. He reached for a yellow legal pad and wrote something down. Then he looked up. "This is not sophisticated litigation, Mr. Mercer. This is a courthouse. Not a stage, not a boardroom, not your father's country club. A courthouse. And in a courthouse, people with money do not get extra truth." That was one of the shareable quotes people would post, clip, and repeat millions of times over the next week. Nathan shook his head like he pitied everyone around him. "With all due respect, I think this proceeding has become personal." Judge Bell answered, "No, it became moral. You're the one who made that dangerous." At 12:06 p.m., just as it seemed the pile of evidence had peaked, Ellen Pierce received a message from the building's security supervisor. She read it, then handed it silently to the bench. Judge Bell's eyebrows lifted slightly. He looked at Nathan. Then he looked at the courtroom monitor. "Counselor," he said, "do you recall your conversation in hallway 3 at 8:54 this morning?" Nathan blinked. For the first time, true fear showed on his face. The security supervisor had pulled interior hallway footage after hearing about the witness contact issue. The courthouse cameras had no audio in most halls, but hallway 3, due to prior safety complaints, had a new integrated mic near the check-in kiosk. Ellen loaded the clip. There was Nathan, crisp and confident, standing with Colin and Blake just outside the courtroom doors. On screen, he adjusted his cufflinks and smirked. Then the audio came through. "Relax," Nathan said. "This judge runs on sentiment. He'll scold, maybe sermonize, then cut the number because he wants to feel like everyone learned something. If he starts getting misty-eyed with the bike guy and the kid, we'll object until he folds." Blake laughed. Colin looked deeply uncomfortable. Then Nathan added the sentence that detonated the room. "It's basically charity in a robe." No one had to tell the gallery to react. Gasps broke loose. A woman in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Ruth Donnelly let out a stunned little sob. Officer Ruiz's jaw set so hard the muscle jumped. Even Alicia Brenner, who had likely heard every variety of professional stupidity, looked genuinely appalled. The clip ended. Nathan Mercer remained standing, but whatever image of himself he had carried into that courthouse was gone. You could see it, in the sweat collecting under his collar, in the way his right hand kept opening and closing, in the strange, rigid stare of a man hearing his own soul played back to strangers and discovering it sounds uglier than he imagined. Judge Bell broke the silence. "The loudest man in the room," he said, "is often the one most afraid of the truth." That was another line that would go everywhere. Nathan's voice came out raw. "You're making a spectacle of me." Judge Bell replied, "No, Mr. Mercer. You did that in the hallway. We're simply refusing to look away." This was the ultimate confrontation the opening promised. Not a shouting match, not a fist on the bench. Something worse for a man like Nathan, a precise refusal to let him control the frame. If you are still here, hit that subscribe button because this is where most stories about justice end. The evidence lands. The arrogant man is humiliated. The room feels satisfied. But in this story, there was still one more twist coming, and it would hit harder than any sanction. By 12:40 p.m., Judge Bell had made 3 immediate rulings. He found Blake Holloway liable on the traffic and civil impact record before the court. He referred the witness contact evidence and the body cam material for formal disciplinary and possible criminal review. And he held Nathan Mercer in direct contempt for repeated disrespectful conduct and improper behavior affecting the administration of justice, imposing a fine and ordering the transcript expedited. It should have felt like pure justice served. And it did for a moment. People in the gallery felt that sharp, satisfying release that comes when a bully finally hits the wall of consequence. Blake stared at the table as if he had just understood money could not buy a different video feed. Mia cried from pure relief. Naomi exhaled with her whole body. Ruth squeezed Mateo's arm. Lena shut her eyes and whispered, "Thank God." But the most unexpected moment came right after Judge Bell announced the contempt finding. Nathan did not explode. He did not shout. He did not storm out. He just stood there breathing too fast, staring down at the polished wood edge of counsel table as if it were the only solid object left in the world. Then Judge Bell asked him a question no one saw coming. "Mr. Mercer," he said, voice softer now, "when did you decide the law was permission to stop seeing people?" The room fell still in a completely different way. Nathan looked up. And for the first time all day, he looked less arrogant than lost. He tried to answer, nothing came out. Judge Bell continued, "Because that is what H. append here, not just bad judgment, not just incivility. You stop seeing human beings. And once a lawyer does that, the danger is not only to clients or witnesses, it is to the lawyer's own soul." People were crying openly now, not because Nathan deserved pity yet. He hadn't earned it, but because that question cut deeper than punishment. It named the rot. Nathan swallowed. "You don't know anything about me." Judge Bell held his gaze. "I know enough to recognize ruin when it walks in well-dressed." That should have been the end of it. Then the back doors opened. A woman stepped in wearing a faded navy coat, damp curls pinned carelessly, a canvas tote over one shoulder, and the exhausted expression of someone who had rushed there after deciding too late she should have come sooner. She was 64 and smaller than Nathan, with the same dark eyes. Arthritis bowed her fingers slightly when she removed her gloves. Naomi stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. "Nathan," she whispered, "your mother's here." Every face in the room turned. Helen Mercer had spent 30 years as a legal aid attorney in Pawtucket representing tenants, domestic violence survivors, and people who could not afford the luxury of being spoken to slowly. She had retired the year before after a stroke and never liked courtrooms where men wore silk ties and smiled, while poor people begged to be believed. She and Nathan had barely spoken in 11 months. Nathan stared at her like he had seen a ghost. She walked forward carefully, one hand on the bench rail for balance. Her eyes moved from him to Judge Bell, then widened with recognition. "Sam." Judge Bell's expression changed too. "Helen." A murmur swept the gallery again. Of course they knew each other. Public defenders, legal aid lawyers, old courthouse veterans. The law remembers its own. Helen looked at Nathan, then at the victims, then at the monitor still dark above the bench. She understood more in 5 seconds than most people would understand in an hour. "Oh no," she said quietly. Nathan's face broke a little. "Mom, not now." Helen ignored him. She addressed Judge Bell. "I got a call from Ms. Hart. She said my son needed somebody in the room who remembered who he used to be." Nathan closed his eyes. Judge Bell said gently, "Ms. Mercer, I would ordinarily not expand the record further, but I suspect what happens next may matter more than the record." Helen nodded, stepped toward the witness rail, and asked for no oath. She didn't need one. The truth was already all over her face. "Nathan was 12, she said, not taking her eyes off him, "when he came with me to the legal clinic on Smith Street. A tenant named Mrs. Carvajal brought us a bag of clementines because we kept her landlord from putting her grandchildren out in January. My son sat on the copy room floor eating those clementines and told me he wanted to become a lawyer because, and these were his exact words, "I want scared people to feel less scared when I walk in." The room went silent in the most painful way yet. Helen kept going. Then his father got sick. Then his father died. Then Nathan decided kindness was for losers who didn't get invited into the expensive rooms. Every year after that he got sharper, better paid, better dressed, harder to recognize. Nathan's lower lip trembled once. He bit it still. Helen stepped closer. "But I need everyone here to hear me clearly. This man did not begin cruel. He trained himself into cruelty, which means he can no longer hide behind talent and call it nature." That line hit like another verdict. Naomi cried openly. Mateo looked down at Sophia, then back at Nathan with a different expression now. Not softer exactly, more complicated. Because here was the unexpected compassion moment. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But humanity returning to the frame precisely when punishment felt easiest. If you've ever watched a parent tell the truth that no stranger could tell as powerfully, drop a comment telling us whether this was the moment Nathan Mercer finally understood what he had become. Nathan finally spoke, but the voice that came out did not sound like the man who had walked in at 8:51. "Mom, please." Helen did not raise her voice. "No, you wanted a courtroom. Here it is. Look at them." She pointed not angrily but firmly toward Mateo, Ruth, Lena, Mia, and little Sophia. "Look at every person you turned into an inconvenience. Look until they stop being abstract." He looked first at Mateo, whose sling strap had dug a red line into his neck, then at Ruth, who clutched her cane with both hands because anger and old grief sometimes arrive together, then at Lena, whose knee brace peeked under her trouser cuff, then at Mia, 19 years old and still shaken because a man with power had tried to learn how much fear would buy her silence, then finally at Sophia, who met his eyes with the solemn hurt only children can deliver. Nathan's shoulders collapsed. Not a little. Completely. He sat down, then stood again because sitting felt wrong, then covered his mouth with one hand as if maybe he could push all the ugly words back inside himself if he tried hard enough. He began to cry so suddenly that even he looked startled by it. No dramatic sobs, no performance, just the involuntary, humiliating grief of a man realizing that the image he served had eaten the person his mother once knew. Blake whispered, "What the hell is happening?" No one answered him. Judge Bell spoke then, and his voice carried through the room with a strange mixture of sorrow and steel. "Humility is what arrives," he said, "when performance finally collides with evidence." Another quote, another line people would never forget. Nathan lowered his hand. "I'm sorry." The words were weak at first, small, almost useless, the kind of apology people hate because it often comes only after exposure. Judge Bell did not rescue him from that. To whom? Nathan looked at Mateo. "I'm sorry." Mateo did not answer. Nathan looked at Mia. "I'm sorry." Mia cried harder. He looked at Naomi. "I'm sorry." Naomi said, "I know, that's what makes this so tragic." Then he turned toward Judge Bell. "I was wrong." Judge Bell held up a hand. You were worse than wrong. Wrong is a mistake. This was moral vanity weaponized by a law license. That sentence would later be quoted on radio shows, podcasts, and local news broadcasts. It was brutal because it was accurate. Then came the twist around the 7,000-word mark that nobody expected. The twist that kept the story from becoming just another public takedown clip. Mateo Silva, the man Nathan had humiliated, asked if he could speak one more time. Judge Bell nodded. Mateo shifted painfully to his feet, keeping one hand on Sophia's shoulder. He looked at Nathan for a long time before speaking. When my wife died, he said, people kept saying time heals. That's not true. Time just teaches you how to carry what does not leave. This crash gave my daughter another thing to carry. The way you spoke to us today gave her something else. Sophia leaned against him. Mateo continued. So no, I don't forgive this just because you're crying now. Pain is not an eraser. But I also don't want my daughter learning that the only answer to cruelty is destruction. Even Judge Bell seemed surprised by where he was going. Mateo nodded toward Nathan's mother. If that woman is telling the truth, then somewhere inside you there was once a man who wanted scared people to feel less scared. If that man is dead, then let your career die with him. If he's not, then you better spend the rest of your life proving it. There are moments in stories where the entire moral center shifts. That was one of them. Not revenge. Responsibility. Not escape. A road back so hard most people would rather call it punishment. Nathan stared at Mateo like he had just been handed something heavier than condemnation. A chance. And chances are terrifying when you know you do not deserve them. Hit that subscribe button if you believe mercy can be harder to receive than punishment. Because what Mateo Silva did in that courtroom forced Nathan Mercer to face a future no fine, no sanction, no viral shame could complete for him. By 1:25 p.m., the hearing formally ended. Blake Holloway was ordered to post interim restitution. The record was referred out. Alicia Brenner left with copies of every exhibit. Naomi sat beside Helen Mercer and held her hand. Reporters who had started gathering outside the courthouse doors buzzed with the hungry electricity that always follows a public collapse. Nathan, however, did not rush to the cameras. He stood alone at counsel table while the room emptied around him. Colin quietly removed his own appearance form from Nathan's trial binder and placed it on the desk. "I'm joining another firm," he said. "I can't do this." Nathan nodded once, no argument. Then Blake came around the table, face pale with fury. "You said you controlled this." Nathan answered without looking up. "No, I said I could." "What's the difference?" Nathan finally looked at him. One is confidence, the other was a lie. Blake had no answer for that. By 3:10 p.m., the hallway clip was already on social media. By 6:00 p.m., a local station ran the story under the banner "Attorney Under Fire After Courtroom Audio EMERGES." By midnight, 3 national legal commentary channels had picked it up. By the next afternoon, the compilation had passed 4.8 million views across platforms. Everyone used the same frame for the thumbnail. Nathan half turned toward the monitor, the frozen subtitle reading, "It's basically charity in a robe." This moment would go viral. Everyone in the room had known it before lunch. But what destroyed Nathan Mercer's career was not the clip alone. It was what followed. On Monday, Holloway Mercer LLP removed Nathan's bio from the firm website. On Tuesday, the managing partners placed him on indefinite leave. On Wednesday, Alicia Brenner's office filed for interim suspension pending formal proceedings based on courtroom conduct, witness interference evidence, and related complaints now being reopened. By Friday, 2 former clients had surfaced alleging manipulative billing and pressure tactics in settlement matters. A superior court judge unsealed a reprimand from 18 months earlier involving discovery abuse, previously kept quiet after private sanctions. Everywhere Nathan turned, another layer came loose. The choice and consequence pattern was complete now. Every revelation had changed the scale. Every twist had shown more damage. Every emotional peak had cut deeper because none of it felt invented. It felt inevitable, like arrogance had been building an avalanche with every small cruelty, and all that Courtroom did was provide the final sound. 2 weeks later, Nathan surrendered his bar card pending disciplinary resolution. The Mercedes was gone by the end of November. The Rolex disappeared after that. His apartment on Benefit Street was listed in December. People said his career had been destroyed in one morning. That made for a cleaner headline. The truth was harsher. His career had been hollowing out for years, and one morning finally turned the shell toward the light. If you're still with this story, like this video, because the resolution is not what most channels would give you. Nobody gets magically redeemed. Nobody gives one speech and becomes a new man. Real repair is slower, uglier, and far less photogenic. In January of 2026, 4 months after the crash, Nathan Mercer walked into the South Providence Community Legal Resource Center carrying 2 boxes of donated file folders and a folding table he had bought second-hand off Facebook Marketplace. He was not there as an attorney. He was not allowed to practice. He was there as a volunteer intake assistant. After Helen Mercer told the director she would personally vouch that if he failed the center's standards even once, he would never be welcomed back. The center occupied the first floor of an old brick building next to a laundromat and a Dominican bakery. The waiting room had mismatched chairs, a toy corner with missing puzzle pieces, and a coffee machine older than some of the clients. The walls carried flyers in English and Spanish about eviction defense, utility shutoff notices, wage theft, and child support. Nathan wore a plain navy quilted jacket, khakis, and a $20 watch with a cracked strap. He drove a 2013 Honda Accord he bought from an electrician in Warwick. Nobody at the center cared. His first week, a man yelled at him over a housing form. Nathan apologized. A woman snapped that she had explained her problem twice already. Nathan listened a third time. A teenager rolled his eye and called the place useless. Nathan printed the packet anyway and sat with him until he understood the filing deadline. Not because he was transformed overnight, but because humiliation had finally taught him what expensive schools never had. The law is not most noble when it protects the comfortable from inconvenience. It is most noble when it helps frightened people breathe again. One rainy Tuesday in February, Mateo Silva walked into the center with Sophia. Nathan was sorting utility assistance applications. He froze. Mateo's arm had healed, though he still carried stiffness in the shoulder. The settlement from Blake's insurer had covered much of the medical debt after months of negotiation with new counsel. Ruth Donnelly had received enough to replace her Corolla with a used Subaru Forester. Lena Brooks had surgery in December and was back teaching half-days. Mia Perez had transferred to community college, and, thanks to a victims fund organized partly by donations after the viral clip, no longer worried her rent would become a weapon. But the harm had not vanished. It had just become survivable. Nathan stood up slowly. Mateo. Mateo nodded. I'm here for an appeal packet. Insurance denied more physical therapy. Nathan swallowed. I can get the forms. He did, then came back with them, hands visibly unsteady. Sophia stood beside her father wearing a yellow puffer coat and a backpack with little embroidered stars. Nathan knelt, careful to keep distance. Hi, Sophia. She looked at him for a long second. Then she asked the question only a child would ask with such clean force. Are you still mean? Nathan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. Sometimes, he said, but I'm trying very hard not to be. Sophia considered that, then nodded once, as if the answer had passed some secret test only children understand. Mateo sat with Nathan for 40 minutes while they completed the appeal. At the end, he gathered the papers and said, "You know why I came here instead of somewhere else?" Nathan shook his head. "Because I wanted to see whether you only knew how to be ashamed in public, or whether you knew how to be useful in private." Nathan looked down. Mateo added, Today you were useful." For a man who had once measured success in billables, cars, and proximity to power, that sentence landed like grace. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that redemption is not a speech. It is a schedule. It is showing up when no one is filming. By March, Nathan had become the person new clients met first at intake. He translated forms into plain English. He learned bus routes so he could explain which courthouse entrance elderly tenants should use. He drove boxes of donated coats from one church basement to another. He stopped correcting people who mispronounced his name. He stopped needing to win every silence. One evening, Judge Bell visited the center for a volunteer appreciation event. No robes, just a gray overcoat, a thermos of coffee, and the same deliberate eyes. Nathan saw him near the doorway and immediately walked over. For a second, neither man spoke. Then Nathan said, "You were right." Judge Bell answered, "I said many things that day." Nathan gave a small, sad smile. The one that stayed was this: "I stopped seeing people." Judge Bell nodded, "And now?" Nathan looked around. At the mother filling out a shut-off prevention form. At the old man asking where to sign. At the volunteer law student reading a benefits letter out loud.